In the spring of 1940, the geopolitical landscape of Europe shifted violently as Italy officially entered the Second World War. Bound by the rigid Pact of Steel, Benito Mussolini aligned his nation firmly with Adolf Hitler and the rising Nazi Germany. Mussolini envisioned a new Roman Empire, dreaming of a Mediterranean lake controlled entirely by Italian naval and ground forces. His grand strategy was rooted in the belief that a short, decisive conflict would secure Italy's status as a global superpower. The fascist regime mobilized its resources, aiming to project power across North Africa and deep into the Balkan territories. These imperial ambitions were not merely political rhetoric. They were the primary drivers behind Italy's aggressive military posturing in 1940. Mussolini believed that by striking early, he could claim a seat at the table when the new European order was established. However, the reality of modern industrial warfare quickly began to clash with the outdated logistical capabilities of the Italian military. The initial campaigns in North Africa were launched with great fanfare, intended to threaten vital British supply lines through the Suez. Simultaneously, Italian forces pushed into the Balkans, attempting to secure a foothold that would solidify their dominance over the Adriatic. Yet, these ambitious offensives soon encountered stiff resistance, revealing that the Italian army was ill-equipped for a prolonged, multi-front conflict. The lack of modern armor and sufficient air support meant that early gains were often unsustainable against determined Allied defensive positions. As the months turned into years, the limitations of the Italian industrial base became increasingly apparent to the fascist leadership. Supply lines stretched thin across the desert, and the lack of mechanized transport hampered the ability to maintain momentum in battle. The Mediterranean theater, once envisioned as an Italian domain, became a graveyard for ships and aircraft lost to superior Allied technology. Back home, the civilian population began to feel the crushing weight of a war economy that could not sustain its own demands. Rationing became severe, and the promise of a glorious, short-lived war began to fade into the grim reality of endless struggle. Public morale plummeted as casualty lists grew, and the initial enthusiasm for the fascist cause was replaced by widespread, quiet resentment. The internal stability of the regime started to fracture, as even high-ranking officials began to question the wisdom of the alliance. Hitler, meanwhile, was forced to divert German resources to bail out his struggling partner in the Balkans and North Africa. This dependency on Germany only served to further undermine Mussolini's authority, making Italy appear as a junior partner in the conflict. By 1942, the tide of the war had turned decisively against the Axis, and Italy found itself fighting a desperate defensive war. The Mediterranean was no longer a safe zone for Italian transport, as Allied naval power dominated the critical shipping lanes throughout. The dream of a new Roman Empire had effectively evaporated, replaced by the struggle to keep the Italian peninsula from invasion. As the situation deteriorated, the strategic importance of Italy to the Axis became a liability rather than a tactical asset. The Allied forces, sensing the weakness in the Axis' southern flank, began planning a massive amphibious assault on the Italian mainland. In July 1943, that plan materialized with the invasion of Sicily, a move that would prove to be the final straw. The swiftness of the Allied advance through Sicily shocked the Italian leadership and exposed the total inability of the army to respond. Panic spread through the halls of power in Rome as the reality of an imminent invasion of the mainland became undeniable. The fascist regime, once thought to be ironclad, began to crumble under the pressure of military defeat and domestic economic collapse. Mussolini, isolated and increasingly erratic, found himself losing the support of the very institutions that had kept him in power. The Grand Council of Fascism, sensing the end was near, convened to discuss the future of the nation and the war. This meeting would prove to be the most critical moment in the history of the regime, marking a definitive internal revolt. The members of the council, led by Dino Grandi, moved to strip Mussolini of his command and return power to the king. This internal coup was not just about removing a leader. It was a desperate attempt to salvage the nation from total destruction. The arrest of Mussolini followed shortly thereafter, sending shockwaves through the Axis powers and the entire European theater of war. The collapse of the fascist government was sudden and absolute, leaving a power vacuum in the heart of the Italian state. King Victor Emmanuel III took control, signaling that Italy was ready to seek an exit from the disastrous alliance with Germany. This transition was fraught with danger, as German forces were already positioned throughout the country to prevent such a betrayal. The removal of Mussolini did not end the war for Italy. Instead, it ushered in a new, even more chaotic phase. The nation was now split, with the north occupied by German troops and the south slowly aligning with the Allied forces. This division set the stage for a brutal civil war, pitting Italian against Italian in a fight for the nation's soul. The resistance movement began to organize, drawing strength from those who had grown weary of both fascism and German occupation. These partisans operated in the shadows, sabotaging German supply lines and providing critical intelligence to the advancing Allied armies. The transition from Axis partner to co-belligerent was a complex and bloody process that fundamentally altered the war's trajectory. It forced the Allies to fight their way up the rugged Italian peninsula, facing a determined and entrenched German defensive force. The fighting in Italy became some of the most grueling of the entire war, characterized by mountain warfare and slow progress. Each town and village became a battlefield, as the Germans fought to hold every inch of ground against the Allied advance. Meanwhile, the Italian people endured the hardships of occupation, caught between the conflicting forces of the old regime and the new. The story of Italy in World War II is a cautionary tale of imperial overreach and the devastating consequences of misguided political alliances. It highlights how quickly a nation's fortunes can shift when the reality of war strips away the veneer of propaganda. The collapse of the fascist regime serves as a reminder of the fragility of power when it is built on aggressive expansion. Italy's journey from an Axis power to a nation fighting for its liberation is one of the most dramatic arcs of the war. The internal divisions that emerged during this period would shape the political identity of modern Italy for decades to come. As the Allied armies pushed north, the liberation of Rome became the symbolic goal that would signal the end of the occupation. The sacrifice of the partisans and the regular Italian troops who fought against the Germans cannot be overstated in this context. They helped turn the tide, proving that the spirit of the nation could survive even the darkest chapters of its history. By the time the war ended, Italy had been transformed, its fascist past discarded in favor of a new democratic future. The path to that future was paved with the ruins of the old empire and the blood of those who fought to change it. Understanding this transformation is essential to grasping how the Second World War reshaped the map and the politics of Europe. The summer of 1943 marked a seismic shift in the Mediterranean theater as the fascist regime of Benito Mussolini finally began to crumble. With Allied forces successfully landing in Sicily, the Italian leadership realized that their nation was teetering on the brink of total military collapse. In a desperate bid to save the country from further destruction, the Grand Council of Fascism moved to strip Mussolini of his executive powers. King Victor Emmanuel III acted decisively, ordering the arrest of the dictator and effectively bringing an end to 2 decades of fascist rule. However, the power vacuum left behind triggered a period of extreme uncertainty as the new government sought a way out of the conflict. Secret negotiations with the Allied powers began in earnest, conducted under a veil of absolute secrecy to avoid immediate detection by German intelligence. These high-stakes diplomatic talks were aimed at securing a formal armistice, a move that would fundamentally alter Italy's position in the global war. On the 8th of September 1943, the world learned that Italy had signed an armistice with the Allies, signaling a complete break from the Axis alliance. This monumental decision effectively ended Italy's role as a member of the Axis, triggering a formal declaration of war against their former partner. The reaction from Berlin was swift and brutal, as German forces launched a massive occupation to seize control of northern and central Italian territories. Hitler viewed this betrayal as an intolerable blow to the German war effort, and he ordered his commanders to secure the Italian peninsula immediately. German divisions poured across the Alps, rapidly disarming Italian units that were left without clear orders or leadership following the sudden political shift. The northern half of Italy was quickly brought under direct German military administration, turning the region into a fortified defensive zone against the Allies. Italy was immediately plunged into a harrowing civil war, a chaotic period defined by intense, localized fighting that tore the nation's social fabric apart. Families were often divided by ideology, with brothers sometimes finding themselves on opposing sides of a conflict that had become deeply personal and local. The landscape was scarred by skirmishes that occurred in small villages and major cities alike, as the lines of control shifted with every passing week. On one side stood the newly formed Italian co-belligerent army, which aligned itself with the Allied forces to push back against the German occupation. This force was composed of soldiers who chose to honor the new government's commitment to the Allies, despite the immense risks involved in their choice. On the other side, the German-backed Italian Social Republic was established in the north, serving as a puppet state for the remnants of the fascist regime. This regime, led by a puppet Mussolini rescued by German commandos, fought desperately to maintain control over the territories still held by the Wehrmacht. Amidst this fractured landscape, a widespread and courageous partisan resistance movement emerged, operating from the shadows to challenge the German occupation forces directly. These partisans were a diverse group, including former soldiers, students, and workers who united under a common goal of liberating their occupied homeland. They retreated to the rugged mountains and dense forests, using the difficult terrain to their advantage while launching hit-and-run attacks on German patrols. Life for these resistance fighters was defined by constant danger, as they lived in hiding and relied on the support of local communities for survival. For the remainder of the conflict, these Italian partisans played a crucial role in sabotaging vital German supply lines and gathering intelligence for Allied commanders. They blew up bridges, cut telegraph lines, and derailed supply trains, effectively slowing the German ability to reinforce their positions against the advancing Allied armies. The intelligence provided by the resistance proved invaluable, as it allowed the Allies to pinpoint German defensive positions and plan their tactical maneuvers more effectively. This collaboration between the partisans and the Allied command created a two-front pressure that the German forces found increasingly difficult to manage or contain. As the war dragged on, the intensity of the fighting grew, with both the German occupiers and the resistance engaging in increasingly desperate and violent confrontations. The civilian population suffered immensely during this period, caught in the crossfire of a war that was being fought in their streets and their homes. Despite the hardships, the resolve of the resistance movement only hardened, fueled by a collective desire to see the end of the German occupation. This period of internal strife and fierce resistance eventually culminated in the liberation of Italy, marking a definitive end to the dark fascist era. As Allied forces pushed northward, the partisans coordinated their efforts to launch massive uprisings in major cities like Milan, Turin, and Genoa. These urban insurrections forced the German occupiers to retreat, effectively clearing the path for the Allied advance and securing the liberation of northern Italy. The fall of the Italian Social Republic signaled the final collapse of the fascist dream, as the remaining loyalists were captured or forced to flee. Ultimately, these events cemented the nation's complex and painful transition from an aggressive Axis member to a key, battle-hardened partner for the Allied cause. The cost of this transformation was high, leaving a legacy of division and trauma that would take decades for the Italian nation to fully process. Yet, the role played by the resistance in the final stages of the war became a foundational element of the post-war Italian national identity. It served as a symbol of the people's rejection of tyranny and their commitment to forging a new, democratic future for their country. The transition was not merely a military shift, but a profound cultural and political metamorphosis that redefined Italy's place in the post-war world order. By the time the guns finally fell silent, Italy had undergone a trial by fire that tested the very limits of its national endurance. The story of this pivot remains one of the most complex chapters of the Second World War, illustrating the fluidity of alliances in total war. It reminds us that, even in the darkest of times, there is always the possibility for change, however painful or difficult that change may be. The legacy of the Partisans continues to be honored today, serving as a testament to the power of individual courage in the face of oppression. Italy's journey from an Axis power to an allied partner was a path paved with sacrifice, betrayal, and eventually, a hard-won sense of liberation. As we look back on these events, we gain a deeper understanding of the forces that shaped modern Europe and the resilience of the human spirit. This chapter of history stands as a stark reminder of the consequences of unchecked ambition and the enduring importance of democratic values. Through the chaos of war, Italy found a new direction, emerging from the ruins of fascism to take its place among the free nations of the world.